All right, we're back. The TexAgs High School Football Show as we are crossing the halfway point of the regular season in the Lone Star State. Ryan Brauninger, Jason Howell with you as we are on every recording on Wednesday. You're seeing this on Thursday to recap and review and then preview the action across the state of Texas, primarily in DFW and in Houston. Jason, get into the thick of some district races. The playoff outlook is on the horizon, kind of which teams are positioning themselves, amongst the contenders across the state to put themselves in good positions heading into the postseason. So we'll start with you and what you saw last week. I know, I believe you had a blowout, didn't you? And I had a blowout.
Yeah.
But there were some very interesting games across both of our regions. And so I'll let you start in Dallas. What'd you see with your own eyes, and then what'd you see across the area that really stood out?
Well, Tyler Legacy over Skyline 42-7 in Dallas on Friday night. That was where you could find me, and it was a show, man. Jordan Renaud, 2023 defensive end, Texas A&M's been on him since he moved from Florida to Texas, and he definitely looked the part. You're 6'4", I don't know, about 245. He does. I've seen him listed a lot of ways, a lot of weights, but whatever he is, he holds it well, very well put together, passes the eyeball test, and then he got it done on the field. Showed a lot of athleticism, a lot of fight, was often double teamed, and, did a great job, just showing a wide variety of skills throughout the game, got plenty of pressure on the backfield. And Jamarion Miller averaged 20 yards a carry. I think he had 11 carries for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns of over 50 yards. And then he had a 23-yard touchdown reception. So he looked the part, just like you would expect one of the top running backs in the country to look. And Jamarion Miller, those were the two big takeaways for me from that game. And then in the area, I mean, you had some pretty big, the Melissa Argyle game.
Yep, Melissa, you went out and saw them in practice, and I remember you saying, hey, like these kids, that's a good looking team.
And they started out, I want to say they started out 1-2 on the season. And they have, definitely put it together and got some things going. They had a tough non-district schedule. They had a tough early start to the season. They were playing some real contenders, but and it showed last week. I mean, shutting out Argyle, not just beating them, but shutting them out. That was a big deal. That Nigel Smith, the 24 defensive lineman, had a great game. Really showed well. He's got offers from, I think, Notre Dame, LSU, and several others. He'll be a top national recruit when it's all said and done. But definitely on A&M's radar as well. So he was getting after it on Friday night. And then you had Rockwall kind of stumbling a little bit. They've come back down to earth after losing to Rockwall Heath in that shootout that's ended in the 70s. They come back down to earth and nearly lost to Mesquite. You would think a team with state championship aspirations would be able to get over the hump, but they had to pull that out. It was a close ball game in the 20s. And then South Oak Cliff posted 77 points on Mesquite Poteet and ran away for a 77.
They're 5A Division II, correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, and they're going to be a team to watch.
Yep. They're number 6 in the state in this week's rankings.
Duncanville, people have given them a tough time. They definitely had some more struggles than they have in the past in the early season, but the talent's there. And South Oak Cliff gave them a fight into the fourth quarter, and really in the latter parts of that game, they were able to make them, take some pretty deep breaths and question, how secure that game was. But they they stepped up against probably one, their toughest opponent that they'll face until the playoffs, and put a 77-3 knot on their forehead, on Poteet's forehead. So Jamari Colley had 5 receptions for 199 yards and 2 TDs.
Pretty good average.
And the crazy thing is, he's probably a better linebacker defensive end than he is a receiver.
Wow.
Impressive prospect. But they keep him over there on offense, let him do his thing on offense. But people inside that program say his potential is probably on defense. So, but yeah, and then I gotta hit Frisco with the 43-7 win over Liberty, and a battle of really good Frisco ISD teams. And I think Frisco, sends a message that they're definitely one to watch there, outside of Frisco ISD and across DFW and the state of Texas.
Well, speaking of sending a message, what I saw on Friday night was an emphatic message sent by one of the best high school football programs in the country, the Katy Tigers, coming into a matchup with Katy Tompkins. And if you'll remember last year, Katy Tompkins gave Katy their first district loss. And I can't remember.
We thought this one was going to be close.
Yeah, and I can't remember what the streak was that Katy was on. But so Katy came into this with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and it certainly showed. 56-21 final, and it really wasn't even that close. I mean, Katy came out and just blew the doors off of a good Katy Tompkins team, a Katy Tompkins team that's got college players and a lot of I saw really impressive young offensive linemen that I think it would not surprise me to see A&M get involved with here pretty soon. But, Katy came out and did what Katy does to lesser teams, and that was the most impressive thing. They just imposed their will on both sides of the ball all night. Now that makes it so I did talk to a very prominent Katy, lifetime Katy High guy after the game that said it has not been since 1984 that Katy has lost back-to-back years lost to the same district opponent.
Wow.
That is an incredible streak. All things considered, as, populations move, new schools open up, and Katy's been that consistent for going on 37, 38 years now. Just an incredible run by that school and that program. And again, that was the first time I think they went into a game with a huge chip on their shoulder. And listen, they did that without Malik Silla and Bobby Taylor. So there's 2 Power 5 guys not on their roster playing, and they're still doing that. They just overwhelm you in every part of the game. And so I fully expect when we get to these playoff previews and we start talking about state champions and state title contenders, I think it's fairly obvious that the Katy Tigers will be amongst them. But, in Greater Houston, another big game in the 6A level was Spring against Spring Westfield. Both of those clubs came in undefeated and in the top 10. Spring Westfield outlast Spring 31-21 and has now jumped North Shore in the state rankings, according to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. The Mustangs of Spring Westfield coming in at number 8 in the state. And I did want to shout out, we don't talk a lot of Hill Country, right? Austin Westlake continues to roll out there behind Cade Klubnik and that fantastic defense. I would suspect they're going to make another state championship run. But creeping into the top 25 for the first time this season, well, actually the second time, but they're moved up to 24. And there's a reason why we should be interested in this club, Jason, the Smithson Valley Rangers at 24, home of Texas A&M 2023 offensive line commit Colton Thomason. Got a big one, a rivalry game this week against Schertz Clemens. I'm hoping that I get to get out there to see him, or somebody gets to get out there and see Colton soon. If nothing else, it's a beautiful stadium tucked right into the middle of the Texas Hill Country. And it's a fantastic place to watch a game. But, there are some clubs out in the Hill Country that we haven't talked about that are, having great seasons, especially at the 6A level. You look at Austin Vandergrift. There was a Cibolo Steel. There's a San Antonio Brennan. San Antonio Brennan undefeated. So we do need to give love to those schools out there, because somebody's got to come out of Region 4 to challenge these big Dallas and Houston schools. So and Westlake has been the traditional power to do that. But they're going to be pushed at some point during these playoffs.
Yeah, and those San Antonio teams, they often get overlooked. Like you said, Brennan's doing their thing, and you got Smithson Valley there that they're rolling along, and you know I think a lot of people are kind of down a little bit because Converse Judson hasn't been as strong as people thought, but I mean, that team still has a lot of talent, and district play is just beginning. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a team like Judson, get their pieces together and make a strong run. They also played a very stout, non-district schedule. So it wouldn't surprise me to see if Converse Judson pop back into the conversation there. Um, but yeah, you talk about some of those tough matchups coming up this week for some of the commits, and I look at Clear Springs with Clear Falls on Friday night down there, and the
Noah
Houston
Thomas has
area.
had a really good run of games here.
Yeah, and
Willis against the Woodlands. That's two A&M
mhm.
offers going against each other. A&M commit Martrell Harris against 2024 quarterback offer Derek Lagway. You've got Connor Wigman. How's he going to bounce back in a big-time matchup this week against Cy Ranch? Not bounce back in terms of performance, but bounce back in terms of his health. He left last week's game late in the third quarter with a little nagging hamstring injury. He's got I believe something wrong with like a bruise on his heel. So some nagging things that, what percentage will he be at and what percentage will he need to be at to beat a school like Cy Ranch? And if you really want to look ahead to next week, it looks like Cy Park should roll this week. If Bridgeland is able to knock off Cy Ranch, then you've got Connor Wigman versus Harold Perkins, both undefeated in a big-time matchup next Friday night. So we'll have to see what happens this weekend, but I would expect, knowing Connor like I do, for him to perform, to play well, and figure out a way to get to that primetime matchup against Harold Perkins and Cy Park. But you're right. The schedule this week is a very interesting one, and we were talking about some of the DFW games. Yeah. Where are you going to be, and then maybe a game or two you're keeping an eye on?
I'll be at I'm looking at the Denton Ryan, the Colony game on Thursday night. Should be a pretty solid little matchup there for Ryan. I look for them to kind of pull away and win, relatively with relative ease with that defense. But the Colony's got some players and should put up a pretty decent fight. And then I'll be over in Allen to watch Allen and Little Elm go head to head, get a little look at DJ Hicks and Nato Umazulo. So should be a fun one there with that. And Allen seems to have kind of found their stride a little bit since that loss to Atascocita. And I look for them to continue to build that momentum and kind of keep things going there as the playoffs approach. They that district's going to be fun to watch with them, but yeah, they're going to set up pretty nicely. They should be able to find a way into the playoffs and be another contending team. And then if I'm looking at the schedule, you got Eaton at 5-1 against Keller at 5-1. So that'll be a pretty big matchup there for Hunter Herb. Keller's been a strong team. They've really come on this fall and put some teams to the test. And Eaton, that should be a nice district matchup. Kind of show who's going to be right there. With Southlake in that district. So it should be a fun little test for both squads. And Argyle's looking to bounce back against a 5-1 Anna team, and so they don't get any easier for Argyle this week. And so we'll see what Jaden Scarlett and those guys out there at Argyle do as they look to bounce back from seeing their longest losing streak in Texas winning streak in Texas come to an end last
Give
week.
me Longview at Highland Park. I'm real interested in that outcome, what that looks like. Longview's very much look like they've bounced back since they were embarrassed in that opening weekend against Denton Ryan.
I was gonna say, I mean, both of those teams, both of those teams bounced back really nicely from opening weekend losses. You know, you had Longview dropping to Denton Ryan, and then you had Highland Park that got taken to the shed a little bit by Southlake. So, those guys have really rebounded well. Highland Park, notched a big win over Walkwell a couple weeks ago, and has really seemed to find their stride. And Longview found some offense as well along the way. And it should be a nice little test. They took it to Wiley East last week. I want to say it was 56-0, 58-0. Longview is always tough, and you knew they weren't going away, either one of these teams, when they opened the season 0-1. I'm also up here. I'm also watching that Euless Trinity North Crowley game. It should be nice and physical battle. You know what you're getting with Euless Trinity. They're coming down here, and they're going to hit you in the mouth, and that's offense and defense.
Steady diet of Ollie Gordon.
Yeah. And North Crowley, I mean, they've got some guys that'll pop you too. They're really I think second or third year under Coach Courtney Allen, and he's doing a tremendous job there. Got a lot of talent, both senior and underclassmen there at North Crowley. They're sitting at 4-1. It should be a nice test. They get Euless Trinity at home. That should be fun to watch. And then you got Waxahachie at Cedar Hill. That should be a fun little battle there in South Dallas.
Well, I am off the road this week. I'll be staying in town I've got some baseball responsibilities with A&M, hosting the University of Houston in a fall baseball game on Friday night. But another game in Houston that I didn't want to let slip by was Atascocita against Summer Creek. A big-time rivalry, and will feature two of the best offensive linemen in the state, Cam Dewberry against Oregon commit Kelvin Banks. And then we started the episode talking about kind of previewing the playoffs as we get into the I guess, later stages of district play. Two playoff games that I'm looking forward to that I think one of us needs to be at. If Denton Ryan against College Station happens early like it typically has, that's going to be a huge one. I mean, those are two legitimately state championship contenders in 5A Division I. And then 5A Division II is interesting because you're going to probably get a South Oak Cliff against Aledo at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And then potentially
it's happened in the last few years, actually. Yeah.
And then potentially a Aledo Fort Bend Marshall again in a state final. Fort Bend Marshall, listen, they're in a bad district. Jason, they're going to running clocks in the first half, and I've heard that a couple of their second half have included 2 5-minute quarters. Just to get, because it's 56-0 at the half and offering no resistance. So that's always a tricky part for Fort Bend Marshall to really have to turn it on to come playoff time. They haven't had any issue doing that recently, but those could it be a fourth time where Fort Bend Marshall and Aledo meet up at AT&T Stadium for a state title? Most of those games have been must-see TV and been very entertaining. So sign me up for a fourth version of that. So we're on the road. Jason, you're on the road again. We'll probably have some interns out again covering some games, but we thank you for your viewership. We hope you've enjoyed listening to me and Jason babble about Texas high school football as you're on your way to a game potentially this week, and we'll be right back here next week. Potentially some huge matchups on the horizon in Week 8, but Jason and I will be right back here to recap it all and preview it all on the TexAgs High School Football Show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.